For me, it's a funny story. So in college, I had four interests. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. I was studying forestry, engineering, computer programming, and I loved my chemistry professor. I thought he was an amazing teacher. And within my first semester, I pretty much decided that chemistry was going to be it. I knew that I wasn't going to like forestry just after the couple of classes that I took. And what I ended up doing is my professor was also my counselor. And he was describing to me this cooperative education program that they had with my university, Northern Arizona University, and the Drug Enforcement Administration in San Diego. And I was so excited about the possibility of getting that internship to be able to go there and learn how to do the job. And if all things went well, I would actually get a job at the end. So my professor talked to me about it. I met with the lab director at the time. I was very fortunate to have been selected. And I became a forensic chemist trainee while I was still in school. So I was getting the benefit of learning how to do the job. And then ultimately, when I graduated, got my degree, I walked straight into a job. Unlike many of my friends who were looking for jobs at that point, I walked straight in. It was really an amazing opportunity for me. A Bachelor of Science in Chemistry with an emphasis in criminalistics. This was in, 1990 is when I first started. I started in May of 1990. And I went there to the DEA laboratory in National City, California, and I started learning how to do the job. I stayed there through the summer, so I got about 6 months worth of work, and then I went on leave without pay to go back to university to finish classes and curricula. And then I would come back again for another semester in the summer. So I did two stints where I went back and forth, and then once I finished that, I came back and got my degree, and then I walked straight into a job. The beauty of that point too is at that moment I had been fully trained. So I walked right into the job within maybe a couple more weeks of training, and then I started doing it. So I really had an amazing opportunity to, right out of college, start doing work, analyzing evidence, testifying in court, and all the exciting things that they described to me that this job was going to be.
And that was on day one.
That was on day one. I mean, I didn't testify everything on day one, but I started, finished my training and started doing the work within several weeks of getting my degree. Back in then, I want to say we were about a third of the size that we are today. We didn't have as many laboratories or locations. The demographics were quite different. It was almost very heavily male oriented. We only had a few females in the organization. If you fast forward to today, it's quite different. It's actually, we're much more heavily female oriented than we were back then. But the labs were much smaller in size. The types of work that we would receive were smaller exhibits. We would go into our vault and everything was captured and recorded in heat seal evidence envelopes. If you fast forward to today, we drive forklifts in our vaults. We're warehouse operations, just managing the type of evidence that we have seen over the years. It was very exciting. My entire chemist career was very exciting. But when I first started, I remember that to this day, my very first exhibit that I had completed the analysis, and there's a picture that I keep very near and dear to my heart in my office drawer. And anytime I have a bad day or I'm just trying to remember what what it was like back then, I pull this picture out. I remember exactly the feeling. I was so proud. I was so happy to be able to sit there and say, this is the first DEA exhibit I've ever analyzed before. And I had turned in my report, and it was almost like we rang a bell that I was able to get this across. I will never forget what it was like. And then I got even more training on the job to do clandestine lab investigations. So they were teaching me how to go out into the field and look at chemicals and say, hey, is this operator trying to manufacture a drug based on the chemicals that he has present? And that was a very exciting time for me. I've had many opportunities to do some really exciting field work. Going out, I've been into Tijuana, Mexico several times. I have been traveled across the world. I've had an amazing career. It's been quite fun. Sure. Started in 1990 as a forensic chemist, and then within about 4 or 5 years, I started getting interested in doing other things. And so I was looking at our managers at the time and the lab directors and thought maybe there's some interest in leadership. So I had the conversation with my wife. She said no. And then ultimately, after much more conversation, she said, let's do this. And we had kind of a family meeting and decided that this would be something I'd be interested in. So I ended up moving from chemistry in San Diego, and my first assignment as a supervisor was in Dallas, Texas. I was nervous, new, didn't know what I was doing. I was coming out of the gate, trying to do all the things right and all the things I thought would be better than my current supervisor. I was there for about a year and a half. A year and a half to 2 years, I did that job. Enjoyed it, had a great group of people that I really enjoyed getting to know. I learned a lot as far as leading people. Still learning to this day. It's a never-ending journey. I then left Dallas, Texas to move to Arlington, Virginia, here. I started as a program manager, where I was doing more programmatic type work, processes and programs, things that more overarching in DEA, learned a lot more about how we do that type of work. Right after that, I was promoted into what we call a section chief. So I promoted into a section chief job in charge of program managers. I did that for a very short period of time. I think it was approximately 6 months. And then I got my dream to go back to San Diego to get my wife happy again, to move her back to California where she was born and raised, and became the associate lab director. And really, what a tremendous experience that I had doing that type of work. It was very new to the system. We had just created, as a program manager, I was one of the ones that's responsible for creating that position, and quality management and all the things associated with that. So I did that job for about 4 years. Really enjoyed it. The lab director had retired, and then I got another dream to be able to be a lab director. I moved into his role, and then did that for about 4 years. Really another amazing experience, running a laboratory, working with our partners, working with enforcement. It was really a fantastic, again, opportunity. After that, there was a position open back here in headquarters, and it was for the Associate Deputy Assistant Administrator. And that position is in charge of our DEA laboratories, so the laboratory directors. So I had another conversation with the wife, and she said no, and then we worked on it a little bit more, and we went back, we got her to yes. That was more of a family event. My daughter had been born at the time, and we kind of did a pros and cons list, and we ended up putting in, and fortunately got selected. So I came back here to headquarters, and I did that job for about 11 to 12 years. And then at the pinnacle of my career, I was very fortunate to have been selected for my current position, which is in charge of DEA's forensics program. And I will tell you, this has been an amazing ride that I look back at it all the time, like, how did I get so lucky to get this opportunity? And we've done amazing things together as a team. It's hard to leave, I'll tell you that. It's hard to leave. That is something we are constantly struggling with, because generally people build their homes and they want to stay there. With family declining and things like that, they want to stay around their family and friends, which I understand. It's getting harder to find people that are willing to move, and it is one of the things we constantly face to this day. We don't have the answers. We've tried various things like doing remote work, like you're a program manager but you're based in Dallas, Texas. We've tried that. It's not as successful as having the people here doing the headquarters work. So we are constantly trying to adjust to find ways to make it work. So we have, that's a really good question. Let me think about that one for a second. I would say that what did they do? They provided me with so many opportunities going through my my chemist career, to learn what the job was about, that when I got into the supervisor job, that part was easy. The people part, I think we could have done a little bit better. We have since, over the time since I was trained, now we have group supervisor institutes within the first year of assignment. We receive training. We have been much more proactive in forensic sciences to provide those interested individuals with training. We get them out there and getting them leadership class. We buy them books specifically. One of my favorite books that I bought every supervisor in our system, and I talk about it all the time. It drives them crazy. But I think they see it because I like it because it's like a Cliff Notes version of leadership. It's called the Primes, and within a few pages it discusses a topic, and it makes it so easy and understandable. So we have been doing a good job of training our future leaders from this day. Back when I started 35 years ago, I wouldn't say it was as good as it is today. For me, it was probably a lot more self-inflicted, meaning I had the love of learning. And anytime there was something new, I was always the one first out of the gate, tell my supervisor I want to be involved. I want to get that instrument. I want to tear it apart. I want to build it again. I want to build a method. I was so excited about all the new stuff that was coming out. And in turn with DEA, if you have people that are motivated like that, most supervisors don't say no. They're like, yeah, we want to keep him engaged. We want to keep him involved because this is the type of stuff that's going to push us forward. So I take that lesson, at least from my experience, and I share that with my people now. So anytime we've got somebody that's raising their hand often, they're the first ones that, yes, you're going to get this opportunity. I want you to experience this. So that was probably primarily how I stayed abreast of most of the new technologies. I would say yes to that. I think it is the same. I think it's still a mix of general, when you have employees, there's a mix of people that are just always raising their hand that want to be part of everything, and we have people that want to do the job and go home, and that's fine too. But we will provide training to everybody, and so I would say, if anything, it's continually improved as far as the training that we provide to our folks, but I wouldn't say it's declined at all. Oh, it's so exciting. 1990s, when I would tell my friends that I'm analyzing heroin and cocaine, they're like, wait, what do you do for a living? I go into work, I go to the vault, I accept a piece of evidence, and my job is to tell you what it is. My job is to take that evidence and turn it into information. Information that could be used by a prosecutor, by the general public, by legislators, lawmakers. That was my job. And it was exciting because I felt like I was part of this bigger picture. The agents are out there getting the bad guys, arresting them, and they're trying to build a case. I'm part of that prosecution team. I'm part of that team to say, this was heroin. This was 72% heroin. I would get on the stand and testify. So very exciting. Clandestine laboratories, getting called at 2 o'clock in the morning, getting in a car, driving to work, getting my gear to drive to a clandestine site in the middle of nowhere was exciting. In the 90s, quite often, I would go on I've probably done on, and my guess is somewhere 40 methamphetamine laboratories. I've done fentanyl laboratories. I've done many conversion laboratories. There was a lot of that work back when I first started. It's dried up now, and primarily because most of the manufacturing has been pushed into Mexico, China providing chemicals. It's not really so much domestic anymore. It's really, it's cheaper, it's easier, and the regulations and laws are different in Mexico. So it's dried up. And that was one of the most exciting parts of my career, to be able to tell the story. I would go in and say, I'd find chemical A, B, and C, and say, well, with that, yes, I would testify that they could make methamphetamine. In fact, that is my belief, because they had the apparatus, they had the chemicals, they had this, they had that. And I would sometimes testify even though there was no product present, and they would still get prosecutions. So me telling the story based on my training experience.
Were you mentored in your early years?
Yeah, one of the main reasons I came to work for DEA, there was a senior forensic chemist by the name of Harry Skinner. He was God to me, and he was just the most gentle, nicest, smartest man you've ever met in your life, and he is still a friend of mine to this day. I wanted to work with that man, and he has been my mentor to this day. I remember my first time testifying, and my girlfriend was in town. She was still in university. And I took her with me, and I remember being I was so nervous, but I was also so excited because this is the first time I'm going to get on the stand, and I'm going to try to get my words out to make them comprehensible to the jury and to the judge. And it was a very exciting experience for me. So I remember being so nervous. Once I swore in, said my name, swore in the Bible, within probably 10 seconds, I felt so comfortable. I knew that this is something that I was going to enjoy. But probably the most memorable time, there was a case. It was a Bureau of Narcotics Enforcement officer that was alleged of stealing 350 kilos of cocaine out of the evidence vault out of a 400 kilo seizure. Yes.
This is California Bureau of Narcotics Enforcement.
Correct.
BNE.
Yes, sorry. And they were, the investigators at the time were able to tie 10 kilograms back towards him through him selling it through other means. And they had come to me and say, Scott, is there any way that you can take those 10 kilograms and tie it to the other 50 kilograms we have left in the vault to be able to tie them to the entire seizure? Because they only had 10 kilograms, but they know 350 of them were stolen. And I remember at the time I said, I don't know, let me take a look. So looking at the science, a kilogram of cocaine to another kilogram of cocaine is completely different. The way that they manufacture it, it comes in 1 to 2 kilo batches that profiles, and scientifically we can only tie like these two together. We can't tie 300 plus of them. So I looked at a little different approach. So I literally started tearing apart the layers and peeling them back. And every kilo generally has multiple layers. Let's just say, for example, the first layer was tan tape. I went over the 10 kilos, tan tape. Next layer, yellow tape, clear cellophane, cellophane. To this day, I remember one of them had contact paper and it had a fax number, 264-1171. 264-1171, both fax numbers match. So this is when PowerPoint was coming out. So I took pictures of both cases, of the ones they could tie to them and the ones that were left over, and I did a PowerPoint in court to sit there and say it was my opinion that these 10 kilograms were from the larger seizure because of all the interlocking and the matching. Am I a tape expert? Am I an expert? No. I was just looking at it from using the scientific principle to be able to try to tell a story. And so I went to court, and the very first trial was, I spent 3 days on the stand, 3 full days. He had 4 defense attorneys. This is a police officer, 4 defense attorneys, and I could tell you some more about the story, but I remember he had something like $1 million cash in his house. I don't know how many police officers you know that have that much cash sitting around in their home. But ended up at the end of the 3rd day, it was a hung jury. So about, I don't know, 6 months later, I was back in court. He didn't have as many defense attorneys this time. I was there for 2 more days, 2 more full days on the stand, and they were just barraging me with like, are you an expert in tape? Are you an expert in packaging? Are you an expert in this? And I would say, well, no, but I'm an expert in, I've analyzed hundreds and thousands of kilograms of cocaine. And I've typically seen this, but I've never seen it line up so perfectly before to the fax number that matches exactly on the contact paper. So my testimony is actually what tied him to the entire seizure. And he was given the final sentence because of the total seizure. So that was probably the most profound, exciting, scary beat. I will tell you, I was exhausted after 3 days of testimony. I was exhausted. I went to the hotel room that night. It was in Los Angeles, and I crashed. I think I slept for like 3 days. I love testifying. I don't say I would have a bad say, but I'll tell you one other story that was interesting. About 8 years ago, I was testifying in a case in Dallas, Texas. And I was on the stand, they were asking me questions, and all of a sudden the fire alarm goes off. And we evacuated. There was an actual fire in the federal building. So we were sitting on the street, there's a fire, and I was desperately wanting to get home because we had a family function that night. I had a flight, I had to be home, and I was really getting nervous that I wasn't going to make it because my wife would probably not be too happy if I missed another family event. Fortunately, they got the fire contained, they let people back in the building, and I got to get back on the stand. But that's the first time I've ever had to leave the stand because of a fire, an actual fire, not a drill. They did train us very well. We had, at the time, our basic forensic chemist program that I was involved in, and we were there, I forget the number, I think it was 3 weeks in total at the time. And they did a lot of exercises in prepping us to be able to testify, how to turn to the jury, how to answer the questions, and how to provide analogies and examples to try to reduce the complexity of the topic to something that's a little bit more desired. So they did train us very well. Sure. So backing up just a second. So DEA was pursuing accreditation, laboratory accreditation, The idea here is that we have an external body come in, evaluate our policies and procedures, and say that we are meeting a particular standard. It gives our partners and customers confidence in the work that we produce and that we provide. So I was involved in the very first time when we were getting accredited at the lower level. It was very eye-opening it was very difficult because we hadn't done that before. Prior to that, if I needed to change a method parameter, I could just turn a knob and change it and then turn in my work. After accreditation, we have to do validation studies and verification studies and all these things to prove that turning that knob doesn't affect something down the line, which makes sense. We want to make sure that we have the utmost confidence. Well, when I was the associate lab director, the entire community was moving towards an international standard, not just an American type standard. So we're moving more to this ISO 17025. Which is for testing and calibration laboratories. So we were the first ones out of the gate in DEA to get accredited by this company. We were the first ones. And at the time, the person in my position, his name is Tom Janofsky, because we were the only laboratory in the system that didn't receive any findings. And I did have a little advantage because they had gone to some other labs first, and some of the findings, I had fixed them over the weekend before they got there on Monday. So I was a little maybe overzealous there. But at the end, once we got our accreditation, Tom Janofsky had awarded me the very first certificate because of the efforts that we had went through to get a credit. So I have that certificate at home that I display proudly.
And now certification is the standard for DEA's forensic sciences.
Yeah, in fact, it's also a DOJ requirement that all laboratories, especially federal laboratories, have to be accredited in order to do forensic type work. Yeah, it actually comes from my upbringing, because when I first started with San Diego Laboratory, we were connected to the division. And agents would walk down the hall and they'd say, Scott, hey, I'm going to go do a buy this afternoon. Would you mind testing this to see if it's any good? I want to know if they're selling me the good stuff or the bad stuff. I'd say, go get a cup of coffee. I'll give you an answer in 5 minutes. And it was so exciting to be part of that mission. And over the years, what happened is we closed our doors, we closed the hallways, we moved our laboratories away from the divisions. We hardly see our agents anymore. We don't have that direct connection to the mission. So I had been in this position, I had pitched this idea that I'd like to get back involved with our divisions for several reasons. We call it operational integration. We have built several labs now within divisions. Our most recent one was in Atlanta, Georgia. And what prompted that is a conversation I was having with the head of our administration office. And I said, you know, the closest laboratory for Atlanta is 635 miles. They have to transport that evidence from Atlanta, either driving it north or driving it south to get it to a closest lab. And I said, this is crazy. Is there a way that we could actually integrate lab services in Atlanta where it makes sense so they don't have to drive it? And the evidence is right there. We get that connection again with our customers and our partners. And fortunately got approval to do that. This year, we did our ribbon breaking. Cut the ribbon and congratulatory, hey, we've got a laboratory. I can't tell you how exciting it is to see that happen. The scientists that are working in that laboratory are so excited because they're, again, working alongside our agents. Nobody has to talk to them about mission anymore. The mission is right there in front of them because they see it every day. Same thing we did in Phoenix. We have we call it the LARC, the Laboratory Analysis Response Center. It's portable laboratory that we put into their garage. Phoenix division receives half of the DEA, of the fentanyl pills in all of DEA. But yet all of their exhibits they were sending to the state and local laboratories, not DEA. So I had pitched an idea, can we integrate this laboratory service in Phoenix? We'll analyze your evidence right there on the spot so you can go out there and get more evidence, because it's just the nature of where Arizona is in the supply chain. And we were able to get that up and running. So it's been exciting. The chemists that work there, the supervisors that we have in these are they're working because they have a lot to do without less resources. But we're also integrating with the divisions too to save on money. This is incredibly cost saving because we're sharing guard service, sharing parking, sharing utilities, sharing rent. We have a 10-year plan that will save the estimate is closer to the $40 to $50 million in a 5-year period that we will save by integrating these services and reducing the size and footprint in these other kind of major labs. So those are the areas we're looking at. I do think it helps several things. One, it has helped us with our backlog because we're on site analyzing evidence directly with the divisions. Speed is important because if the attorneys aren't getting the reports that they need to prosecute their cases, they are left to other means. They may not prosecute to the highest extent of the law. They might have to make a plea deal or reduce the sentence or reduce the charge because they don't have the results. We have been able to, over the last 2 to 3 years, our backlog was 42,000 exhibits awaiting testing. And we received somewhere in the neighborhood of 60,000 exhibits a year. That's almost a year's backlog, plus all the stuff coming in. We have worked so hard to get everybody aligned and moving areas of responsibility so that we can maintain and stay up to date. We've got that backlog down to under 6,000, which is perfect because our incoming is around 5,000 to 6,000 per month. Our capabilities are 5,000 to 6,000 a month. And we've got it locked in perfectly as long as things don't shift too much. But we're constantly trying to get ahead of it because, for example, there's a surge this week where agents are going out to, we anticipate a lot of evidence coming in. And we're already getting prepped on how can we do this more efficiently? What is the fastest way that we can analyze this evidence to get the most concrete results as quickly as possible? So it's a constant struggle. Yeah, so where it is today is we are receiving somewhere in the neighborhood of 60,000 to 70,000 drug exhibits per year that we have to analyze. Back when I first started, it was around 15,000 to 20,000 exhibits. The difference being is the size and the nature of the exhibits. As I described earlier, a heat seal with a baggie of cocaine was what we received in the 90s. Now I'm receiving 400 boxes with 5,000 kilograms of cocaine, and that's one exhibit. It's the same thing. So not only is it the number of exhibits, the amount of work has increased substantially because of having to test a percentage of those exhibits to be able to make an informed decision for the court. It's, we call it short swig drug. And it started actually with the FBI was having a lot of working groups. They were doing working groups on paint chips and working groups on trace materials and all the different forensic type disciplines. And then the person that was in my position at the time said, we can't have FBI do drugs, that's us. So rightfully so, we took on swig drug. And he had started the program within DEA. So DEA has been managing swig drug since its existence. And I was fortunate enough to, at some point, I remember, I think I was still the associate lab director, and the person in my position called me up and said, hey, I'd like you to be part of this swig drug thing. And I said no at first. I admit this. I said no because I was so overworked and I was getting accreditation and I was trying to I was very, very busy, but he worked on me a little bit and I said, okay, I am so glad he did because it was one of the most rewarding experiences of my career. Surrounded by other countries. Everybody was represented. We had Singapore and Australia and all the different countries, as well as the domestically forensic scientists around the world. We would get together and say, these are the standards on how you actually analyze drugs. In order to call this thing cocaine, you must do this, this, and this. We became the international standard for how to do the work. And in my involvement, again, it was very exciting. I got to be the chair for almost a decade, or a little over a decade, actually. And one of the things I had done is I wanted to help the world. And so we provided even more tools. We provided libraries, mass spectrometry libraries to the world to say, if you don't know what this drug is, here's a hint. I'll tell you a quick story too. I was in Singapore and I was attending the Asian Forensic Science Network meeting. And I had gone there for a couple of years, and this one year there was, I forget which country, I want to say, let's say it was Vietnam. I think it was somewhere in Asia for sure. And they said, they were showing a graph that they didn't see any of these new psychoactive substances, and then all of a sudden in 2005 there was a spike. And I raised my hand in the back and I said, what do you point that spike to? They said, it's the swig drug library. They didn't know what these substances were. So I got to tell you, I'm warm in my heart right now thinking about that we are helping the community analyze things, provide this information so we can get ahead of it and fight these battles. I would probably start there. Swig drug is our primary thing that we use to get international. We have a website, everything is downloadable for free. We don't have any registration requirements. If you need a library, if you need a tool, if you need a spectra of what this new substance look like, it is all free by clicks of a button. That's probably the first thing we're doing. We are very heavily involved in the community. We've got our senior scientists doing research, participating and presenting in international meetings, getting everybody to understand, here's what we're facing in the US, here's the things we're determining. We have some really exciting things that we can do. We can tell you that this cocaine was grown in this part of Bolivia. We can tell you that this heroin is from this part of Afghanistan. We can tell you that they're making fentanyl with this, and this precursor, which is new. It's really exciting work. They call it like the reverse Walter White. If you're familiar with the Walter White scenario, they're the good guys, but Walter White kind of re-engineering so we can tell the story. Tell our enforcement officers, hey, you need to watch out for this precursor. They're going to start buying this one next. You need to watch out for this chemical. They're going to spy it. It's been really exciting to be part of the front lines to help our partners. So about 2.5, 3 years ago, I had an idea. I have a good friend that is my position at CBP, Customs and Border Protection. And he and I have known each other for 3 decades. And we were both having a conversation. It's like, how could we help each other? They have a very similar lab system, except they're on the southwest border. And both borders, sorry, all borders. They cover the borders. And we said, what could we do that would be something that could help fight this fight, especially from a scientific way? And he had mentioned that he had a partner with FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. So I said, well, why don't we get together? Let's have a meeting. So the 3 of us, along with some of our staff, met in San Diego. Well, we went to Otay Mesa, went on the border, where all the drugs are coming right through. And we had a conversation. We sat there and looked at each other and said, what could we each do? And at that moment is when I realized each of us have a unique scientific expertise. CBP had pollinologists on staff that could tell you that this pollen is from northern Sinaloa, Mexico. If we could find that pollen in drugs, we might be able to tell the story. FDA is experts in counterfeits. They could tell you that this pill was pressed from this particular dye set and this pill matches that pill. DEA, we have expertise in geosourcing. I can tell you that this heroin was made and grown in this part of Afghanistan. And it came to me and I looked at each other, why aren't we partnering? If we get the 3 sciences together, think of the powerful information that we could provide to be able to help combat fentanyl and nitazines and all the new synthetics that we're seeing these days. And that's when Intrepid was born. Now, Intrepid actually is an acronym. It stands for Intelligence National Threat Response, El Paso Illicit Drug Laboratory. We loved the word and we made it fit, to be honest. But it's been exciting for us because we've been getting funding. We've already got the funding. We're building out the space at our EPIC, at our El Paso Intelligence Center, where we've got our partners. I have a meeting with our partners this Thursday in person because I am retiring. Actually, all 3 of us are retiring this year. So we're having kind of our last meeting and kind of a baton handoff to make sure that our vision continues, because it is very important that we continue this work. I'd start with probably communication, the fact that we can communicate it at a moment's notice. I think about this now. We didn't have a cell phone when I first started. And then we got a cell phone, and it was the size of a brick. You remember those big old cell phones. And it was really interesting because we would have pagers. We were given pagers, and we would get a phone. And I just remember, how did we do this? We had to find a pay phone or go home to use our home phone to be able to call the pager number to say, hey, what's going on? Oh, you need to go to this location to do this lab. So I would start from just the basics. And nowadays, you have these computers at a moment in your pocket that can do everything. It can tell you information about what this chemical is. We're building toolkits and apps for our agents to be able to say, this is something that, hey, watch out for this. It's been really exciting to see that difference. And I honestly don't know how we did it back then. It's hard for me to even remember, because I've had the same computer in my pocket too. It's been nice having it. One of the things I don't think we fully realized the value of the data that we have. It wasn't until a couple of years ago, and many conversations with our administration at the time, started getting us thinking about, wait, we have a really powerful data set. For example, recently, I've assigned one of our senior level folks with our Special Operations Division and Intelligence. And I embedded them there. I said, I want you to learn what they do, figure out what questions they have, and what could we do to actually help using science in a forensic manner to help with investigations. One of the things we did quickly is, we have these unique profiles. We had a case out of Alabama and a case out of New York that had the same profile. It had fentanyl, acetaminophen, and 3 other things. It was very unique. We don't see that combination that often. So we went to our Special Operations Division and said, can you overlay the cell phone records that you have to see if there's any connections? Lo and behold, guess what? There were connections. There was, in fact, 2 individuals that had 642 communications over a several-month period between the 2 organizations. Enforcement had no idea that those 2 were linked. It came from the forensic science side to be able to say, hey, look at this, and now they are now talking, our Alabama and our New York agents are talking, realizing that there's a link there that didn't exist before. So that's just an example of some of the stuff that we're really trying to exploit. We have so much powerful information, especially getting into AI and machine learning. We think we can throw these models at it that can do it even better. The way we discovered is we just said, a chemist was looking and said, well, that's unique. Well, easier to have some AI doing that work for us to be able to help tell these stories, to get ahead of what's the next precursor. What's the next drug? Once we regulate something, xylozine's a good example. We're very close to getting xylazine regulated. So what do? The bad guys have already switched to another chemical called medetomidine. They've already started importing it. They've already started using it in seizures. So they know it takes us time to regulate stuff. We're going to regulate it, and they're going to switch right to this new one. Now we have to regulate medetomidine. But our plan from the science side is, what else can we do to get ahead of it? To using the same tools that they're using against us, against them. And to be able to say, this is what's next. So then maybe we regulate before it becomes a problem, as opposed to after. I have one sentence that I typically say, and we take evidence and turn that into information. That's our primary objective. And what is that information used for? Legislators, the American public. When we say that there's 6 out of 10 pills that can kill you, that information's coming from us. When we're trying to tie a prosecution, everything that we do is evidence that we turn into information. George Papadopoulos, one of the prior deputy administrators, principal deputy administrators, he had asked me, what is your saying again? And I told him, we take evidence, turn it into information. And he did a presentation, and he said, we take information and turn it into evidence. I'm like, George, you got it backwards. So we had a conversation. I was like, wait a second. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. My role is to take evidence and turn it into information. I hand that information to you, and then your job is to take that information and turn it into more evidence. So then we sort of created this banter between the 2 of us, and it was right. So yeah, big picture, our role is to take that evidence, turn it into information, period. Simple. It sounds simple, not always simple. No, I did not. In fact, I will tell you that I would, as a chemist, I would look at the supervisors, I would look at the lab director at the time, excuse me, and I would say, I would never want their jobs. No interest, no desire to ever do that job because it looks painful. Now, maybe it was because of the type of leaders that I was surrounded at the time. I'm not trying to be negative about that, but I would say, no, that job wasn't of any interest. But at some point, chemistry, I wanted to challenge. I got to a point where it wasn't as challenging as it was. And I will tell you this, to that day I made the decision to get into leadership. It has been challenging ever since that day to now. I am still learning. I will continue to learn about leadership. And, but yeah, it was the right decision to make. But yeah, I did not want to do it. I didn't see it happening. Methamphetamine, the way in the sentencing guidelines are written, that there's 3 distinctions for prosecutorial purposes. There is what they call total, which is the amount of substance containing methamphetamine. So if I've got a kilogram of substance and it's 50% methamphetamine, doesn't matter, it's a kilo because it's a substance containing. And then they have what's called actual, which is when we do a purity determination that says it's 50%. Okay, well that means it's 50% methamphetamine and 50% something else. And then they had a third term called ice, defined as if it's 80% or better D-methamphetamine hydrochloride. So we had to determine the purity and we had to determine the isomer of methamphetamine for them to charge that prong. So there's 3 prongs just for charging, for sentencing methamphetamine. And every other drug that we have, for the most part, is 1 prong, substance containing. Cocaine, for example, heroin, it doesn't matter the purity. If it's 1% or 99%, you are sentenced potentially to that entire kilo. Now, their judges can do certain things with the sentencing guidelines, but it has always been problematic because there's 3 different prongs. We had to do 3 different types of tests to be able to answer this question. So I started a mission about 20 years ago to try to change this. I started with the commission, the U.S. Sentencing Commission, did not get anywhere. So then I tried to go to Congress, did not get anywhere to try to get on their docket. The next thing was working with the AG, the Attorney General's Advisory Committee at the Department of Justice. That's the first time we finally got some interest. And we explained to them, here's the difference. It costs us an enormous amount of time to do all this type of testing to provide for what should be just one and done, at least in my opinion. And we finally were able to convince the United States attorneys that we were going to do this type of testing and try to minimize all this other extra work that we're doing. And that was the first step that we got. And then several months ago, I got called by an individual at the department that works with the Sentencing Commission and said, hey, Scott, I was told to call you about this thing. We want to have somebody testify in front of the Sentencing Commission about their thoughts and ideas and what the Sentencing Commission should consider for future changes to the regulations. I was so happy to finally, I got to testify a couple of weeks ago. It was so, kind of like a 20-year thing. Now, I don't know what the outcome will be. From what I've heard, they are considering a lot of the changes that we spoke about, but it was really kind of like the pinnacle of the career to be able to finally close the loop and testify in front of them, and hopefully they'll make the changes that we talked about.
And ultimately what you're recommending is a streamlining of the process to eliminate so many tests that ultimately get to the same answer.
Yeah, I was advocating for substance containing, and if not, then at least a purity determination, because there's a sentencing disparity between if it's just total versus actual. And more importantly, one of the things I learned while testifying is they had asked me a question. Scott, why do you think that U.S. attorneys are charging total when it results in a lower sentence? Why wouldn't they charge actual or ICE? Because it involves 5 to 10 times more sentence for the individual. And it hit me right then and there that the issue is the fact that our backlog was so long. It took us 9 months. Back when our exhibits were 42,000 waiting to be tested, it took us 9 months to get to it. So the attorneys had no choice. They couldn't charge on anything else because they didn't have the information. So they would do plea agreements, they would do smaller charges because that's the only thing they could get across. So that's when it really hit me that this needs to change. And one of the things we've advocated for too is increase the charge for total to match actual and ICE, because the reality of today, all the meth we get is 99+%. It's all pure stuff. That's what Congress was trying to combat 20 years ago. They wanted to get ahead of it before this deadly, high purity, high isomer, potent methamphetamine was going to hit the market. Well, it was a good thought. It just didn't work. Now everything we get is 99%. So the whole point was, why do we have these distinctions when there's no difference in the meth that we get today? We have had attorney generals come to headquarters, but not to our laboratories that I can recall. And we had an opportunity to meet with her staff, and I had suggested, hey, we would love to have her come out to the laboratory, tell her some of the things that we're doing. It's exciting work that we have at our laboratory, especially at our special testing and research lab. And they bit. So we set up a meeting. It was interesting that we only had 45 minutes. And her staff was like, she's got a heart out, she's got to be out at 45 minutes. So we had a plan. 5 minutes here, 5 minutes at this station. And we all come into the conference room, just normal pleasantries. We spent 45 minutes in the conference room. And I kept looking at her staff. I'm kind of really concerned because I wanted her to see the laboratory, not just come to the lab and go into a conference room. And they were like, it's okay, it's okay. She spent 2.5 hours with us. It was so exciting. She was so engaged. She asked a lot of questions, and we had every stage of the different types of things that we do there. And she was so enamored by it. She says, you know, I'm going to tell the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I'm going to tell everybody they need to come out here and see the work you're doing. And she was very impressed by the work that we did, so much so that she, several months later, she had some extra tickets to the presidential signing of the Halt Fentanyl Act. And the first people she thought of was us. And she says, I want to invite the chemists to come witness the signing. More importantly, she said, I want them to come to my office because I have a little surprise for them. Go to her office at the department, and then we're going to go over to the White House to see. We got to her office. Unfortunately, she was called to the White House, so she wasn't there. But she had coffee and snacks and goodies, and her staff was so complimentary, and she was apologetic that she wasn't able to make it. But still, it was very interesting to hang out in her office. We took a bunch of pictures. I did not put my feet on her desk, despite popular belief. But then we went over to the White House and got to see the signing. So it was really, again, at the end of my career, it's one of the highlights that I like to point to. I would give a lot of credit to our forefathers that devised our lab system, because they had the thought to have, we need to have a research laboratory dedicated to just research. And to display the difference in the beginning is our field laboratories, they do exactly field work. Evidence is obtained, agent goes out and arrests the bad guy, they bring the evidence to us, we tell them what the answer is, we give them the information. In our field labs, we take samples from those submissions, and then we send them over to our special testing lab. Our special testing lab has had chemists that have gone into the jungles in Peru and Bolivia and picked coca leaves off of plants and taken that information back, tested it to be able to do this geosourcing to say that, hey, we know that this cocaine was grown in this growing region in Peru, not Bolivia. It's pretty impressive, the type of work that we can do. That is the nature and the work that do. And one of the things that they're so important for right now is staying atop of all the stuff that we're seeing with these synthetic drugs. How are they making it? That's the difference between grown drugs, cocaine and heroin, is we can exploit temperatures and regions and growing cultures and things like that. With synthetics, meaning it's not grown. Somebody's manufacturing it in a laboratory and selling it as a white powder to turn it into something else. There's not a lot to exploit. The main thing we can exploit there is what are they doing and how are they making it? And that in and of itself is really critical. I'll give you one example. There's been a common substance we've been seeing for about a year. It's called BTMPS. And that chemical is used to keep plastics from turning yellow. It's a normal, everyday compound that is found everywhere. People buy ton quantities of this stuff and nobody's matching it. And we started seeing it in fentanyl submissions. And early on, a lot of the experts in the field were saying, oh, they're just using that as a cut. They're just adding a white powder to this. And our scientists were saying, no, I don't think so. They're not doing this just for cut. They're doing something different. And what we found is if you look at the BTMPS molecule and you divide it in half, it looks very similar to a precursor to fentanyl. So our scientists started saying, wait, what if they're going to cut that in half and try to make this fentanyl? Here's the end game is it doesn't work. They can make a fentanyl-like substance, which we're working with our diversion folks right now to see if it's even active on the body. We don't think it is, but we have to do the test. We have to do the studies to verify that it is. But what that tells me is we're making a difference. We're regulating chemicals. We're working with China. We're telling them, can you please regulate this list of compounds? It's getting harder for them to make fentanyl. We know that by restricting these chemicals, the purity of fentanyl over the last several years is going down. I think coupled with enforcement efforts, they're looking at BTMPS, they're looking at all these other ways to make fentanyl. I think we're finally making a difference and we're making them look elsewhere. And I think they're running out of options now. I say that because they're very smart and they have a lot of money. They'll find another option. But we're making their life difficult. That's a key. The information we provide is incredibly valuable, and the best way I think I can answer that is to tell a story. I was doing a news piece several years ago, and it was about an unfortunate incident where somebody's son had bought a pill on Snapchat, took the pill, and died from an overdose or a fentanyl poisoning. And it was with Sanjay Gupta, it was with CNN. And really interesting man that we were having a nice dialogue about this conversation. Anyways, the piece was finished, went out on CNN, and I had my friends calling me saying, Scott, I know what you did, but I didn't know what you do, if you know what I mean. And in fact, one of them said, I made my daughter watch that piece because I was horrified. I had no idea that DA's campaign, one pill can kill. It's real. And so he made the daughter watch it, and several weeks later, he called me back up. He said, I got to tell you this story. The daughter had a friend who bought a pill on Snapchat and was going to take it that Friday night. And the daughter says, are you crazy? Have you seen this thing past this clip of this news article that just talked about how dangerous this stuff was? The next thing was the friend had sent a video image flushing the pill down the toilet. So I guess in overall, all of us have a part in this fight. And most importantly, our parents and our children, we need to get this message out there. So forensics is providing this information, providing it to the public. Take this information. It is incredible. It is, I don't want to say gospel, but it's gospel. It's real information based on data that is real. When we were reporting 7 out of 10 of these pills can kill you, 70% chance you're gonna die, or 30% chance you might live. I don't know about you, Sean. To me, it's a pretty clear answer. I am not going to be associated with anything like that. And the scary part that all these things look so alike. You cannot tell the difference between a legitimate pill and a fake pill. Our scientists to this day, 30 years ago when I started, when we would get a counterfeit pill, it would generally contain the declared value. If it's supposed to contain alprazolam, it probably has alprazolam. It might be counterfeit, but they were making, nowadays, our scientists are like, nope, doesn't contain alprazolam. It's probably fentanyl, or it's probably methamphetamine, or it's probably an illegal substance that's mimicking something like that. So I would be scared, frankly. I would be scared because of the stuff we see, the combinations that we see, mixing carfentanil with cocaine and heroin. You're literally getting the kitchen sink. You have no idea what you're taking. There's no test on the market that you're going to be able to test it and say, okay, it's safe to take this pill, unless you have a forensic scientist or somebody that can do actual chemical testing. I'd be very, very afraid. I'm not trying to fearmonger, but you should not consider taking a pill if you don't know the origin, ever. I'm going to answer both. I'll start with the grateful. I'm grateful because of CSI and all these things, because what it did is it excited the generations of people that were interested in forensics. Prior to that, it was not easy to recruit because people just didn't either know about it or understood. So CSI definitely got us a new wave of applicants and people that were interested into that environment, wanting that work. From the downside, of course, none of it is like true. You don't get an analysis in a day, and you don't have one scientist that does 14 different things and be able to tell the entire story that this came from here. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Sean C. It was in his back pocket. I found his. Yeah, none of that stuff's real. It is. I don't know. I take the good with the bad. I guess I'll leave it with that. I do think there's some benefit to it, but I laugh at it when I watch it on TV, and my friends or my family might say, "Is that true?" No, that's not. We actually helped them with that show. I don't know if you knew that. We participated. They had come to us and said, hey, would you be willing to help us kind of like make the show more real? I will tell you this, that was one of the, with the side of the dramatic effects, the chemistry part was very real. As far as when they took a precursor, they started making it from P2P. That is a real thing. That's how they make meth today. The blue meth, that was all about theatrical. In fact, what that did result in, we started seeing blue meth in real life. that started coming into the laboratory. So again, it's always this kind of like pull and push as far as these types of things. But it was exciting to participate in that making, because they did make it more real than I had seen in other types of shows like that. I think the first thing that comes to mind is, I kind of described earlier, we've always been in reactive mode. Majority of my career has been reactive. New compound, new drug, new something, we see it and we answer it. The message I would provide to the new scientists coming in is, use all tools that we have available. There's so much information out there. There's epidemiology with wastewater testing. There's hospital data. There's toxicology data. There's all this stuff. If we actually put all the data in one place and we capture this information and look at it from that perspective, like the benefits of capturing this information, to then throw AI models at it to be able to predict, I would like our future scientists to think a little bit more strategically, a little bit more down the road, to be able to fight the fight before it becomes the fight, proactively, as opposed to reactive. That's what I would target all of our scientists to start thinking and moving that direction, because then we're going to have a chance to get ahead of this for the first time. And I'm starting to feel it now, that we're getting ahead and we're starting to make a difference. And I want them to just continue down that road. I will tell you, it's been difficult, because I've moved them 6 times, actually. It was never easy. My wife was born and raised in San Diego, and when I met her, she didn't want to move anywhere, but fortunately for me, because I was pursuing my career, and she finally, I didn't twist her arm too bad. But there was a period of time, it was very difficult. There was probably the most substantial one is, it was a 3-year period of time that we decided to leave my wife and daughter back in San Diego, and I was here in Virginia for 3 years, and I was traveling back and forth once a month to see them. I mean, it was definitely a hard time. It was probably the hardest time in my entire career, because my family's my rock. They're the people I want to be around all the time, and when I'm not around them, it's quite different. But I was focused over here. I wanted my daughter to finish her high school education without having to yank her out at that late day and age, and it was a pretty big distance. So that was probably the most unfortunate period of my time. But I do think, from the positive standpoint, I think my daughter grew from it. I think we grew as a family. I mean, we've been through this. We understand what it was like, just the nature of the pain and agony that it caused all of us. And now I think we are a closer, tight-knit group. I'm very fortunate that my daughter works at DEA. We go to lunch together every day. Well, every day that I'm here or she's here. But and despite my wife saying you should let her go out with other people, she calls me too. So I feel like I've got that 3 years back and then some. So I'm very, very pleased. We've got a very strong family. So she works in resource management. Probably what I would say is getting forensic science, lack of better words, noticed. What I mean by that is that we have been able to elevate our office to a division level status. Before we were, I don't want to say buried, but we were lower in the organization. And when we were fighting for resources and supplies and things like that, to be frank, you're in a law enforcement organization. If we're going to buy a gun or a mass spectrometer, chances are that the gun's going to get funded first. I don't disagree with the concept of that. But if I had an agent that was doing the fighting for the two, one of them might be biased in one way. So we have been able to elevate ourselves. I report directly to the principal deputy administrator. And so I'm surrounded by, we've got an agent that's talking about buying a gun, and you've got me talking about buying a mass spec and how that's important. So now I feel like we're at more of a level playing ground. I think if anything, that might be the first thing they say. I'll throw out a second one, and that is the operational integration we talked about, putting divisions or putting laboratories within division space. There was a lot of opposition against that in the beginning. And I would have meetings, and I tried to articulate the reasons why I think this is beneficial. A lot of opposition. Now, they're the biggest advocates for this. Everybody sees it, from the scientists having other locations to live, get home to their families, to be able to be on the front lines directly with their agents. I would say that's probably the second thing that they would talk about. Oh, without a doubt, it's going to be the people. It's what's made this career. It's what's made this building. It's the excitement. I am surrounded by brilliant, amazing, smart, outstanding individuals that fight the fight every day. They're true public servants, and they just want to make it better. They want to save lives, and I hadn't had that experience to be surrounded by so many people like that. And then secondly, going to lunch with my daughter, frankly. I'm going to miss that. I'm going to still have to find a way to meet up. I'll be at the mall. You'll see me at the mall from time to time having lunch with her. But yeah, it's going to be the people. Yeah, I would say it started out primarily with the research that we were doing. We would work internationally with our countries, partners, to say, can we go out there and sample the coca leaves? Can we sample the poppy plants? Can we do that? Because we wanted to get intelligence and information to be able to tell the story. Where's the drug coming from? We know that in Europe, certain parts of like this part of Colombia is going to Europe, and this part comes to the U.S. So that information was incredibly helpful. We worked with our three-letter agencies like the CIA. They would take photographs of the area and estimate like how much cocaine could that produce, so we could kind of tell that type of story. Fast forwarding today, where there seems to be a little less emphasis on some of the homegrown chemical or drugs, moving more to the synthetic market, it's a lot harder to do that type of work. So the things that we're doing in the foreign space these days is more about detection. Like, how can we help them identify this stuff? Because it's being shipped, it's being over the normal process of airplanes and trains, automobiles, all that stuff. And they mislabel it to think that it's something else that it's not. So getting the tools out to the foreign space to say, hey, this will at least give you an idea that this is something you should seize until we can get a full analysis. So that's been a big part of the work that we're doing, to try to, again, to get ahead of it, a little bit more proactive, to seize these types of things.
Does DEA Forensic Sciences collaborate with your version of forensic sciences operations in international countries and their drug law enforcement space?
We do. We just had an international drug profiling conference a few weeks ago, where we invited the various countries in and say, this are the things that we're doing. We want to learn from each other. Here's what we're doing. What are you guys doing? We've shared our methodology. We're sharing information. It's again, the only way that we can kind of get ahead and stay ahead of this process. And everybody's been well. The one thing I always notice is that politically, you know, when you have the political nature of the folks in the room, there's a lot of, yeah, that's great, that's great, that's great. But when you get the scientist from in the room talking, that's when the rubber meets the road. Because we don't have any agenda other than learning from each other and being able to tell the story. So that's been exciting to see that too, that we have purposely been embedding scientists, meeting with our Mexican scientists, meeting with our Chinese scientists, and they're very open about the things that they're teaching us and then we're teaching them.
I'm glad you just said that. It is a two-way street. They're sharing sources, methods, ideas, tests, results, questions, quandaries with you, and you all with them.
That is correct, and it's the only way it's going to work. And we've had great relationships that we've established with our foreign partners.
So you've been on the job since 1990, so that means you've covered the height of the Medellin cartel with Pablo Escobar, the Cali cartel, the rise of El Chapo in Mexico, the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, and opium heroin processing labs in Afghanistan, and the global shifts after 9/11 and transshipment paths and whatnot. Has there been any notable memories and thoughts from the international side of any experiences you've had?
Probably what I would start with is, in the 1990s, our drug repertoire was quite simple. Cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, marijuana. Those were the primary drugs that we saw. You know, we started when steroids were being abused, we'd get some steroids, and every now and then we'd get some tryptamines and things like that. But those were the primary drugs. Nowadays, if you fast forward back, the cartels were aiming at that type of drug because it was, you know, grown in their growing. Nowadays, we literally are getting everything under the sun because they're trying to get ahead of the scheduling actions or the regulations. So if they take fentanyl and they add a chlorine molecule somewhere on that structure, it changes the drug entirely, which then starts the entire process over. We've got to regulate that one. If they move that chlorine to a different part of the molecule, it's a different substance, which is really the importance of the HALT Fentanyl Act, because that scheduled all of the types of options. Wherever they put that chlorine, doesn't matter, it's controlled. So we've had to learn and evolve over time. Our regulations have had to learn and evolve over time. But it's quite different the way it was back then to where it is today.